On January 20th, 2018, millions of feminists came together across the country to march for women's rights. One of these rights is a woman's right to control her own body and make her own choices. This right is one that would not have been possible without the Crusade led by Margaret Sanger. Margaret Sanger began to spread the news of a revolutionary pill that was a menstrual regulator with a key side effect that would convince millions of women to begin taking it. It prevented pregnancy. In doing this, Sanger began a battle against the Catholic Church that would climax in 1972 with the Supreme Court approving the complete use of the pill. In Sanger's conflict with the Church, she revolutionized what it meant for a woman to be in control. Compromise was never truly reached, but the movement pushed forward and ultimately succeeded because of people's ability to prioritize birth control over faith. The result of the conflict surrounding the pill transformed a woman's place in the workforce. By allowing women to plan their children, they were able to pursue a career without focusing on a child. It furthered their place in higher education by giving women a real chance to be something more than a mother. The 1950s was an age of technological wonders and a new era of drugs, but the scientific community wanted no part in developing new forms of birth control. Science was a field governed by fear. A fear of public opinion, a fear of religious intolerance, a fear of political pressure, and an overarching fear of bigotry and prejudice. It was a field dominated by men, adding a layer of bias that slowed the pace of reproduction research. This bias was not one that was solely a feature of science. Women had been viewed as inferior throughout most of history. Sex and reproductive rights were no exception. Margaret Sanger grew up in a world where her mother was pregnant 18 times with 11 miscarriages and 7 children. Her mother was dead by age 49. This was not uncommon in 19th century America, especially among the poor population. Women were expected to find satisfaction in serving their husbands and children. For a woman to receive an IUD or diaphragm, they had to be married or at the very least have a prescription. Comstock laws suppressed the trade in and circulation of obscene literature and articles of immoral use, further limiting the accessibility of birth control. One woman said, "I knew birth control existed, but I didn't know anything about it. To go out and actually get it would mean that I planned to do these things, to have sex. Birth control would have been cold-blooded." This shame stemmed from the overarching role religion played in the average American's life. Religious commitment peaked in the 1950s. In 1957, over 95% of Americans associated with some religious tradition. Roman Catholic doctrine declared that sexual intercourse was a sin. Since the first centuries of Christianity, there was a belief that all illicit sexual acts must be procreative. The only form of permitted birth control was abstinence. Margaret Sanger spent her life as the nation's most outspoken advocate for birth control, challenging Comstock laws, and in doing so challenged the church, men, and the government. She broke countless laws and for this was sent to jail, but kept fighting despite her limited success. Sanger's campaign increased accessibility of other forms of contraceptives, but she dreamt of a simple pill to help trapped and desperate women. At age 71, Margaret Sanger began looking for a scientist who was willing to join her on her risky mission. Sanger found Dr. Gregory Pincus, a reproductive psychologist who was struggling with his own private laboratory after Harvard had expelled him because of his success with in vitro fertilization on animals. Pincus understood the science of reproduction and knew that the key to contraception was hormones, but this kind of work would cost millions. In 1953, Sanger visited Pincus, but this time she brought along her friend from her suffragette days, Catherine McCormick. McCormick had been one of the first women to graduate from MIT, and other than her interest in finding a scientific solution to the birth control movement, she was part of the prominent McCormick family in Chicago. Her late husband had left her with an immense fortune. Without the funding, Pincus's research would have come to a halt and the pill would not have become a reality. Now with McCormick funding the project, Pincus began injecting lab animals with progesterone to see if it would stop ovulation. Once this worked, Pincus had one problem. He wasn't a physician. Pincus found an unlikely ally in Dr. John Rock, an esteemed fertility specialist and an OBGYN who was also a profound Catholic. Rock disagreed with the church's position on birth control after delivering many unwanted babies to overwhelmed mothers. In 1954, Rock began testing progesterone pills on 50 women. After months of testing, the results came back, and not one of the 50 women had ovulated while on the progesterone, but this was just the beginning. In order to get approval from the Food and Drug Administration, there would have to be a bigger trial. Pincus convinced drug company G.D. Searle to supply pills with 10 milligrams of progesterone and a small dose of estrogen for a large-scale trial on the women of Rio Piedras, Puerto Rico, in 1956. After 9 months, the pill was deemed effective. The side effects were dismissed. Now that there was a working pill, G.D. Searle had to decide if they were willing to begin marketing the pill. In 1957, Searle began marketing the pill as a treatment for menstrual disorders with the name Inovid. The pill began in Chicago as Searle's plant was located there, but soon it would sweep the nation.
Women were feeling more empowered and wanting to take control of their reproductive freedom and rights.
The pill had taken off, and on May 9, 1960, the FDA gave its approval for the birth control pill.
You see women of every economic level who want to be able to plan their lives.
I think women are much more, they feel much more empowered and able to control their destiny.
Now, with half of the population of women in childbearing years taking the pill, conflict over the social aspect of it began to grow. John Rock believed that the aspects of the pill did not conflict with the church. Rock tried to change the Catholic response to the pill, and many believed that the church was about to shift its centuries-long stance after creating a committee to study the pill. Women began to go to college to become doctors, lawyers, professors, and they did this without worrying about their marital status. It had seemed as if the pill had started a sexual revolution. It now had over 10 million users. Then on July 25, 1968, Pope Paul VI issued the church's final pronouncement on the pill. Millions of Catholic women defied Catholic rule and continued taking the pill because of how important it was to them. But the conflict between the Catholic Church and the birth control movement would never reach a compromise. For years to come, churches would falsely brand the pill as an abortion pill and solidify their position as a barrier against birth control.
There were people, and there are still objections to that on faith-based.
Our message today is that the pill kills babies with its abortifacient effects.
We could not give patients birth control in the hospital. We could give them birth control across the street at the clinic, but we were not even allowed to talk to them about birth control. We could not tie their tubes if they wanted their tubes tied after delivery, which was fascinating. I mean, that was crazy to us.
The most commonly used, the most popular method of birth control, the one that 4 out of 5 women have used, is a pill that will literally cause your unborn children to die.
Trump was elected last year. We had a huge uptick in the number of IUDs that we put in. Everybody wanted their IUD, they wanted it as quickly as possible because they were scared that it wasn't going to be covered anymore. And right now it has been a covered benefit, so it was interesting.
The pill today has evolved from the original progesterone pills into a pill with slashed hormone levels and much more information, but nonetheless, it was this pill that would launch a generation of feminists. Although true compromise has not been reached, the innovations that Margaret Sanger fought for profoundly changed a woman's role in society for the better. Margaret Sanger would forever be remembered as the hero who brought the pill to women everywhere.